Hello, welcome back to another video. Today we'll be talking about Java methods. A method can have 1 or 0 outputs or 0 or many inputs. So what is a method? Well, right here we see main. Main is a method, and what it takes in is a string array of arguments, or just string array called args, and it outputs a void. What void means is that it doesn't return anything. Public we'll talk about later, and static we'll also talk about later, but for now and for simplicity we'll just say that our methods are public static. So how do we create a method? Well, we create a method in our class, and we usually start off by saying public static. And then we think of what it can return. It can return nothing, like a void, or it can return some other type. So let's say we want a method to return void, nothing, which means it will return nothing, like main. And we'll just call this custom print. And then the parentheses tell us what we want to input. Now, if we want to custom print something, then we might want to input a string. So let's say we want to input a string s. And s is the variable name for the thing that we want to input, and the type of the variable is string. And then we can create the body of our method. So string s is the input. We want to have a custom print. So what should we print out? Well, we want to print out custom print. How do we know that we're printing out something custom? Well, we can just do a system.out.printf. And we can just say we are in our custom function with string %s, and then we can put a \n, and then we can just print out our s string that we passed in. And then in our main method, we can say system.out.printf. We are in the main method. And then we can say custom print. How do we use what we have in custom print? We just write custom print, and then we pass in our string. So maybe we want to pass in custom string. And this is how we call a method. Call a method just means to use the method. So right here, over here was our definition of a method. This is the name of the method, custom print. Void tells us that nothing is coming out of the function, we're not returning anything. And then this is our parameter of our function. Parameter is the thing you want to put as the input into the function. And this is how we say we want to run the function. Everything gets run in our main. So first we will see our first print, we are in the main method, and then we call the custom print method, and we pass in our string, that's this string right here, and then we will see the system.out.printf, we are in our custom function with string, and then we will see our %s being written, which is custom string. So we should see those 2 lines in our output. If we save and run, we will see we are in the main method and we are in our custom function with string, custom string. So what happens if we change the void? What if we want something else? Like if we want to return something, we want an output from the function. Returning something is the output of the function. So let's say we want to have an array as an input, and we want to output an array. So let's just keep it simple with integer, and we always start our functions with public static. We'll talk about public static later, but for now we'll just start off with public static, and we want to return or output an integer array. So we'll just say integer array, like that. And let's say we want to input an integer array, and we also need to give our variable a name, so we'll just call it ARR for array. And let's say we want our function to return only the even numbers in the array. So we will write even nums as our function name. And then how do we take in an integer array and only return the even numbers? So first we're going to have to loop through our inputs and then see if they're divisible by 2. If it is divisible by 2, then we can put it into the array. And if it's not divisible by 2, then we don't have to do anything. So let's first create the array that we want to output. So I'll just call it int output equals new int. And what size do we want to give the array? Well, we want it to be as big as the array that was inputted, since we don't know if every number that's inputted in the array is going to be even. So let's just do r.length, just to make sure we have enough space to fit all the numbers, just in case all the numbers are even. So we have our output, and we have the output the same size as the input, and it's all zeros. So now what we can do is loop through our input array and see are any of the numbers divisible by 2. So we can do for int I equals 0, I less than array.length I plus plus, and then we can see if array at I is divisible by 2, %2 equals 0, just divisible by 2. If the array at I is divisible by 2, then we want to put it in the output. And I think right here we might need a second iterator. So we can say I equals 0 and j equals 0, and also we'll have to increment j once we fill in the position. So we'll have to say that if the input at I %2 equals 0, then we want to say output at j equals array at I. And then we also want to increment j. So if we want to do it in one line, we can do j++. So the plus will increment after output at j equals array at I, then j++. Writing it this way is the same as doing this. Since we're not incrementing in the loop over here, we have to personally increment it when we see that it is divisible by 2. When it is divisible by 2, then we increment. So to make this in one line, I'll just write j++ over here. So if it's divisible by 2, then we're going to set it equal to the input, and then we're going to increment our j after that. And if it's not divisible by 2, then we can just keep going in the loop until we get through the whole array. So now we've created our logic for it, but we want to output the integer array. So to output or return, we have the word return. And what do we want to return? We want to return the array. And that array that we wanted to return was stored in output. So we can just write return output. And then let's try this. So let's create an integer array, and for testing we'll just have all numbers as even. So we'll say int, and we'll say evens, we'll say int evens equals, and let's just say it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So that's our array of even numbers. And then I will say I want to system.out.printf. I want to %s arrays.toString. So in arrays.toString, I want my array to go in here, my output array. So we can take even nums, and then we can put our input evens. So this might look confusing, but let's break this down. So arrays.toString, what this is doing is it's going to print out, it's going to be a shortcut for printing out our array. So what do we want to print out? Even nums. That's the method that we created, even nums. You can see it highlighted here, even nums. So the output of the method is an integer array. So this is valid. Arrays.toString, you want to put an array in here. And are we putting an array in here? Well, yes, because the output of this function is an array. So the output of this function is going to go into the toString function. The toString is also a function, and function and method can be used interchangeably. They're the same thing. So even nums is a function. ToString is a function that takes in an array. And we can see that this method here is an array output. So an array output is going into an array input. So that works. And then over here we have evens. Evens is an integer input to even nums. So we have evens, that's an array, and over here we have an integer array as an input. Even nums has an output of an integer array. This method has an output of an integer array. And the toString method has an input of an integer array, so that works. So this all should work, and if we try to run this, we should get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, just like we had it. But what if we change this 8 to a 7? Let's just see if it works correctly. If it works correctly, then we should have an extra 0 at the end, and I'll tell you why once it runs. We have 2, 4, 6, 10, 0. The reason why we have the 0 is because our output defaults all the values to 0. So when it defaults to 0, then it goes through the loop and says, okay, 2, that's even, so let's put it in. 4 is even, let's put it in. 6 is even, let's put it in. 7 is not even, so we'll skip it. But 10 is even, so we'll put it in. But then we have one extra space left over because of the J++. So what if we wanted to put the 0 in place of the 7? Well, then we could just do a J++ over here, regardless of this J++. So we could increment the J every time. So then we would put zeros wherever the number is not even. So if we rerun this, we should see a 0 where the 7 is. And yes, we do see a 0 because the 7 is odd, so it will not get placed. So these are methods or functions. They have inputs and outputs. So we saw one method with no output and an input. Then we saw a method with an output and an input. But we can also have methods with many inputs. And to keep this simple, I'm just going to make it return nothing, so public static void. And let's try to have a function that takes in multiple inputs and see what that'll do for us. So let's try print add. We want to print the addition of two numbers, and let's take in a double num1, and we'll say int num2. So let's do a system.out.printf, and let's just do a %.2f, so we're rounding to 2 decimal places, and we want to do num1 plus num2. And let's also not forget the new line at the end of there. So this method will take in a double and an integer. It will add them and print them out. And I guess to better see where we are in the code, we can do print add result equals. So then we know that we're in the method print add, and we'll see print add result equals .2f. So let's try that. we'll try print add, and we want to put in a double. So let's do 4.5 and an int num2, so let's do 2. And if we run this, we should see 4.5 plus 2 is 6.5, so we should see 6.5. And we do see print add result equals 6.50 because we rounded to 2 decimal places. So this is how we can have multiple parameters or inputs into our function or method. And the void tells us we're not returning anything. Notice in the void, there's no return. In the int, there is a return. And the return type has to be the same as the type that was specified in the function. So int array and output is also an int array. You can only return the same type. You cannot return a different type. Let's say I put a double num equals 3.14. If I try to return num, then I get this error right here. It says incompatible type double cannot be converted to int with brackets, which just means that you're returning a double, but over here you said you're returning an int array. So these two don't match, so we can't do that. That's why we have to return the same type. So if we have output, then we don't see any errors over here on the side. So these are some methods or functions that have return types or outputs and parameters or input types. In the next video, we will talk about some special things functions can do. We'll talk about recursion.